Manage virtual machine clones and templates. Okay, well, I don't know. That last nugget was fairly exciting, and I know it went a little long, but the whole notion of clustering and bringing together all those ESX hosts into a single unified thing that's now highly available and highly load balanced, and I don't know, it just seems particularly exciting, and in a lot of ways, and I think for a lot of ESX administrators, that whole clustering topic is for many kind of one of the most exciting pieces of really getting to work with vSphere. You can argue at this point, so by now, okay, however many nuggets we are into this series, we've pretty much completed most of the core infrastructure pieces of putting together your vCenter environment. Right? You've got the networking done. You've got the storage done. You've put all the machines together in a clustered arrangement. And so the foundations of what you need to be successful with vSphere are now operational. We've built virtual machines now, and we can see those virtual machines moving around across that cluster. And so from this point on, a lot of the topics are they're add-on, right? They're additional ways to optimize things, additional ways to automate things, additional ways to keep things patched and correctly configured, and all the extra stuff that's required for operational type things. And that's where we're starting today here with this whole notion of clones and templates. Now, this will not be the same 45-minute long nugget that the last one was, but it does introduce some really interesting topics in terms of how you can enjoy some of the copy and paste benefits of virtual machines so that you can very rapidly deploy new VMs whenever you need to. Now, cloning is really kind of a fancy name for copying and pasting the vmdk file for a virtual machine. There's more to it. There are more steps involved. There are more things you're going to do, but really what you're doing is making a copy and a paste of a VM file. Now, a template is really nothing more than a virtual machine's file, right? That has been specially identified that it's not actually for execution. In other words, you don't actually run a template. The template's there so that you can clone from that template to create a functioning virtual machine, but it's still a vmdk file at its core. So in this nugget, we're going to spend some time talking about how you might use those clones and templates. And in this second bullet down here, the appropriate deployment methodology for a VM application. There are going to be a lot of different ways in which you can deploy VMs, either creating them from scratch or deploying them from clones and templates. I hope at the conclusion of this nugget you'll kind of get a feel for when you might want to do that. Once we get into the click-by-click part, we're going to spend time just looking at how you would clone an existing virtual machine and how you would create a template and ultimately deploy a virtual machine from a template. There is this really nifty tool called the Customization Specification Manager that takes what would otherwise be just a regular copy paste and actually allows you to apply some sort of sysprep like things to virtual machines once you deploy them from a template. And then lastly, we're going to go through the process of deploying OVF templates, which are a much more packaged way of transferring a virtual machine from one person to another. And specifically, we'll actually deploy the vCenter appliance as an OVF template because you kind of need to understand what the vCenter appliance is. You can think of it as an appliance mechanism, a Linux-based appliance mechanism for doing the same sorts of things we're doing here with our vCenter server. Now, before we get there, however, this top bullet is what I want to spend just a minute on because this is one of those things where you need to know it because you're running a vCenter environment, but more importantly, you kind of need to know what these configuration maximums are for the exam. This is a document, right? VMware pushes this document out for, I think, every version of vSphere that I've worked with. And what it is it's this giant configuration maximums document that talks about for virtual machines and the EXXI host and also for vCenter server and the extensions for vCenter server, what are the maximums, the resources that you can apply to certain elements in that whole environment. Here are the virtual machine maximums, for example. The amount of RAM per virtual machine, the swap file size, the number of SCSI targets, and the virtual disk size, and just all sorts of just fun little facts that if you're taking the exam, well, you should really know what these are. I mean, these are common. If you're just running a vCenter environment, well, you should be genuinely familiar with what these are because you don't want to end up coming up against many of these maximums. Now, all these maximums are interesting, but really what you're probably more interested in is how do you actually apply this whole virtual machine clones and templates concept to what you'll see inside of the vSphere client. So here we go. This is that same vSphere environment that we've been working with thus far. 3 hosts at this point, 4 virtual machines. We have a resource pool here that's assigned for those marketing people that we created back on that last nugget, and I have one VM here powered off called vm6. Now if I right click on any of these virtual machines and take a look at them, what I'm going to see are a couple of different options here, one of which is the clone option. Now, as you can imagine, what did I say? The whole clone process is I want to do a copy and paste of a virtual machine so that I can create another virtual machine. Very easy to do. So if I wanted to create a duplicate of VM6, I could accomplish that with the clone link here, and then it creates the clone wizard. What's more interesting, however, before we actually get to that point, is this whole template item down here. Now, with a template, I have a couple of different options. Okay, I can either clone an existing virtual machine to a template, or I can convert a virtual machine to a template. Let me convert this virtual machine to a template here. You notice the little icon here where it shows the little VM icon changing into a different icon? Watch what happens. So I'm converting this VM to a template, and wait a minute, it disappeared. Well, where did it go? This is a common oops that may happen if you're not careful, because when you actually create a template, it actually moves that virtual machines away from hosts and clusters and into the VMs and templates location here under inventory. So notice how the icon here looks a little different. This virtual machine now as a template is not something that I'm actually going to be able to power on. So creating a virtual machine template kind of removes the read-write permissions almost from it. You can't power on a template, because if you powered it on, well, it wouldn't be a template anymore. So the idea here is that, well, I could go about cloning my virtual machines if I wanted to. There's no problem here. But the reality of what I probably want to do is to create some sort of, I don't know, golden image or reference image, or essentially a crafted image, just like what you used to do in the days of Ghost for your desktops, that you will ultimately deploy virtual machines whose lives start from that template. If I click the link here, you'll see this brings up the deploy template wizard. Now let's say I wanted to create, I don't know, VM6-1, for example, and I want to put this in my data center here, and I want to actually deploy a virtual machine based on this template. Okay, I hit the next button here, and I put it in my cluster, and I get the validation succeeded item here, and I want to actually allow the marketing people to create their own virtual machines. It's kind of odd as it sounds to give marketing people access to virtual machines, but bear with me through this. So I want these marketing people to be able to make use of a virtual machine template to create the virtual machines that they might need to in order to do whatever it is marketing people do. And the validation here succeeded, so I hit next, and then I identify what the source is, so I then provision it, and I put it on my data store 1 here, which is great. Once I'm done with that, I hit next, and now I get to this interesting screen here called guest customization. So I have a template, right? And the template has been configured in such a way, it's probably in a work group. It's probably got the basic configurations that I would want to have all of my servers have. Those configurations are set up in such a way so I know that when users log in, they're going to get them appropriately. So in the Ghost world, or in the desktop world, we have this thing called sysprep. Right? And with sysprep, when I go and deploy a machine from a template or golden image, well, sysprep then, when the first time you bring it online, it actually asks you some questions that help you customize that computer after it gets deployed. Well, that's what this customization wizard here is. When I do guest customization, I can choose to, obviously, to not customize it, but I can also customize it using the customization wizard. This is interesting. If I hit next here, you'll notice it brings up the vSphere client Windows guest customization kind of secondary wizard here. Now take a look at some of these things. If you've played with sysprep before, you're probably familiar with some of the items in here. The registration information, name and organization, computer name, Windows license, admin password, time zone. If I start just popping in just bogus data in here to show you what these look like, you'll see, well, wait a minute, I can actually deploy, I don't know, I'll call this VM6-1 one, or I can give it a unique value, or enter a name in the deployment wizard. I can give it the license information if I want, or plug in the administrator password, even have it log on as administrator the first time to make the whole deployment process that much easier. I can set my time zone to Tijuana, which is what of course I want to do, and enter in any run once commands here, set up the networking if I want to, and put it in the right work group or domain. So all of these things that are commonly associated with deploying virtual machines from reference images, from golden images, well, that's what this whole guest customization process does. I'm not going to go through the whole process. You can gather what happens. The end result of this is that, well, I end up with a virtual machine that is exactly how I customized it. But this is really exciting because it goes much further than the copy-paste world that many of us are used to thinking of when we're dealing with virtualization, and we kind of add some intelligence to that whole copy and paste process. Okay, so here's this deployment template, and here I've got my VM, and I deploy this VM out, and then once I get done deploying it, it will end up in hosts and clusters down here under for those marketing people. Kind of slick, but these are marketing people, right? And you got to be careful with the marketing types because you never know what they're going to do. And you know that if you give them any sorts of options, they're going to invariably choose the wrong options. So why not actually choose some of the custom specifications on their behalf? That's what the custom specifications manager's for. Right? So I just went through that really nice wizard there and answered all of these questions, right? But I had to do it. I kind of have to be intelligent to be able to about this whole process to be able to answer those questions correctly. So what's to say that I couldn't create a custom specification, call this, I don't know, basic VMs for the marketing group, and then go through answering all these questions for them, just like I did before, run the name of the deployment wizard if I want to, and then answer everything on behalf of those marketing people so that when they know that they need to go deploy a new virtual machine, they're going to get the ones in the specific configuration that I think is the right way to do things. This is cool. So, I don't know, let me just flip through the rest of these and punch in passwords and things just so I can get the whole process completed here. And I'll put it all in the work group and make sure that I always change the security information here because that makes sure I have a unique computer. And once I've done, I've got this nice basic VM for the marketing group. And the next time I actually need to go and deploy a VM or have them deploy a VM, we can go here and deploy a virtual machine from the template, call this VM6-1, put it in my data center, put it in the cluster just like it's supposed to be put in, and then instead of giving someone the access to do everything they want, well, instead I'm going to choose an existing custom specification. There you go. Really, really interesting here with the way in which we can automate this whole process of deploying virtual machines. So this is what you would need to do in order to kind of make things easier for the people that don't need to have complete access to, or don't really want complete access for all of their virtual machines. Maybe I want to go back and make an update to this VM. Now, obviously, I can't power it on, so I need to convert the clone back into a virtual machine, put it on my cluster again, put it perhaps in the right resource pool, just like I did before, and it disappears from this location. It converts back into a virtual machine, and then right back here under hosts and clusters, I see that VM once again that I can interact with. When you go and do your updates, you can now update it and then reconvert it back into a template to make it complete. So this is the clones and templates piece, very powerful part of vSphere Client. If you go through the effort to set it up correctly. And if you plan on having other people other than yourself that are actually deploying VMs, it makes a good sense for you to actually go about doing these automations on their behalf. Now, there are other solutions out there as well. So you are making things faster for people that are less intelligent than you, and there are people that are more intelligent than you that may need to deploy things to you. Another way of deploying those VMs from other people is through the use of an OVF template. Okay, and this is the last kind of topic for this nugget. The OVF template you actually deploy from up here under File. You see File, Deploy OVF Template. Now, an OVF template can be downloaded from the internet. Right? If I have a URL, I can download it right from the internet, or I can download it locally. And I've actually already downloaded one, this vCenter Server Appliance. I told you that this vCenter Server Appliance it's like an appliance-based vCenter server. Right? It's Linux-based. You turn it on, and it creates a website that you can use to actually interact with your vCenter environment. So you don't have to build all this Windows stuff. You can just run it atop Linux. Well, you'll notice that it's actually an OVF file here. The OVF file consolidates all of the packaging information that's necessary to take that vmdk file and ultimately get it into your environment in the way that it needs to. In fact, if I take a look at that file, I go here to Computer, and then iSCSI, and then the Server Appliance, you'll see that I have an OVF file and then two vmdk files that are associated with that OVF. What I described as the VMX information is up here, and here's the VMDK information, sort of. So if I hit Open here and hit Next, well, look at that. All of the information that I need to install that vCenter Server Appliance. Let me hit Next here. I can call it exactly what it needs to be called and plug it into the cluster if I want. I can put it in just our cluster, and I can give it some destination storage if I want. I can give it what disk format I want, with thin provisioned or thick provisioned. And once I'm ready to complete, whoof, there you go. That deploys the vCenter Server Appliance as an OVF template. Now, I'm going to leave working with the vCenter Server Appliance up to you. You can take a look at it and play with it. It's a free download from VMware's website. And it's just, you download it, use it, and you don't need a Windows server for vCenter anymore. But I want to show you this because this is the mechanism that you would deploy pretty much any OVF template from this Deploy OVF Template location. And that's what you kind of need to know. Now, the last piece here is this Browse VA Marketplace, which kind of relates to the OVF templates because there are going to be some of these templates that are going to be available from VMware. Right? There are virtual appliances that VMware has made available for you via their community. If I go to this virtual appliance marketplace, you'll see I've got a number of these different things that I can install. A Catbird vAgent, a Checkpoint virtual appliance, the Hadoop Pig and Hive Cloud Era. A common one, I believe, is somewhere down here. There used to be one, Nostalgia Ancient DOS Games that are ready to play. So these arrive as OVF templates, and also the disk files arrive with them. So you can simply, download an appliance and have it automatically pre-configured so that it works within your environment. Bam, you're ready to go. So what have we talked about in this nugget? We've talked about the whole clones and templates automations that take the process of working with virtual machines and it accelerates it, it automates it. We talked about some of those virtual machine maximums that you're going to have to respect when you do so, but really we spent a lot of time focusing in on the different deployment methodologies you would use for different types of virtual machine applications. Do I create a new VM, or do I create a VM template and deploy from the template? We worked with those virtual machines and we created templates and we deployed VMs from the template. And we took a look at the customization specification manager, which links perfectly in when we're trying to involve other people with kind of offloading some of the scut work of virtualization management. And then we spent a little bit of time talking about OVF templates and the vCenter appliance. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.